So let's dive into the star of progressive web apps, service workers. They do a lot of work behind the scenes. They allow us to make our application offline ready so that it works even if we have no internet connection. And they allow us to use a lot of other next generation web application features like push notifications or background synchronization. So what exactly are service workers? Now let's start with normal JavaScript. We have JavaScript files loaded by HTML pages, and an important thing to know is that JavaScript runs on a single thread. That means that if you visit a web application and that page or that application obviously returns your HTML page, which then executes some JavaScript, the JavaScript code loaded by this page runs on one thread. Now, even if you have multiple JavaScript files loaded by one and the same page, they still share one thread on which they execute their code. That is important to know. Now, these JavaScript files loaded by HTML pages can access the DOM of these pages. This is the JavaScript code you already know. You can show alerts, prompt the user for input, change the DOM, manipulate it, therefore hide elements or add new elements, and execute all kind of logic you want to execute. All the JavaScript frameworks you know, like React, Angular, and so on, they run exactly like this. They are loaded as JavaScript by your page, and they therefore can manipulate the DOM, hence allowing you to create single-page applications or add widgets to your pages. So this is JavaScript as you know it. How do service workers fit into this picture? Service workers are also JavaScript files, JavaScript code. However, they have access to a different set of features. They also run on a separate single thread, and this is important. Now, they don't share the same thread as the normal JavaScript code loaded by your HTML pages runs on. They have their own thread because service workers run in the background. So they also are decoupled from HTML pages, and this is important. Whilst you do register a service worker through HTML code or through an HTML page initially, once you registered it, it simply has a certain scope, I'll come back to this, where it applies to. For example, that could be the domain of your page. So the service worker is then not attached to a single page, but available to all the pages of your web application. So if you have multiple HTML files served from different URLs and the service worker is attached to your root page, to your domain therefore, then it is applicable to all these HTML pages and not attached to a single page like your normal JavaScript is. Service workers also live on even after you closed all the pages in the browser. So even if you close the tab with your web application and you only have other tabs open, or sometimes, for example, on mobile phones, even after you close the browser, the service worker still keeps on running. It's a background process. This is the one thing I want you to take away right now. Service workers are background processes, run in the background. You use JavaScript in there, but they work totally different than the normal JavaScript code. They can't interact with the DOM, they are not attached to a page, they are attached to a certain scope, for example, your entire web application, a domain, and they run in the background. What can you do in service workers then? Well, since they run in the background, they're really good at one thing, reacting to events. They can listen to some events, either emitted by your normal JavaScript pages, or also by your HTML code, or by another server, like web push notifications. I'll come back to these events in a second. So service workers are all about reacting to events. They sit there in the background and they do nothing, but they can react to all kinds of incoming events and then do something. Like, for example, return a cached asset or show a notification to the user. And you will see all these things throughout the course. So that are service workers. Background processes attached to entire application instead of a single page, and all about events. Let's have a look at which kind of events a service worker typically reacts to.